Today we're joined by Dr. Mike Brown from Caltech University, California. Now, Mike Brown is one of the astronomers who worked together to discover the dwarf planet Eris, and this discovery led to the demotion of Pluto back in 2006. Now, he's gone on to discover lots of other objects out there in the solar system, so let's find out what he had to say.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Well, the first question that I'd wanted to ask was, so how do you actually go about discovering a planet?
The survey that we did, coming on 20 years ago now, we were in the middle of it, to find these large objects in the outer solar system. It really started, it's amazing to me how long ago it started. It started in 1998 when there were just a small number of small bodies known out beyond Neptune, in addition to Pluto. And when we looked at that, we realized, astronomers have looked at tiny little patches of the sky, and they have found a few tiny things. If we could figure out a way to look at a big chunk of the sky, we might find the rare large ones. So we did one of those very first early surveys using a relatively small telescope that had a huge digital camera on it that we could cover big chunks of the sky at once. And once you're doing that, it's conceptually simple, although it was computationally intense. Or later take another picture of the sky, and all of the stars and all of the galaxies are in the same place, but anything in the solar system moves just a little bit. So we were simply looking for large things moving slowly across the sky. It was a long, laborious process. Every morning the data the telescope was automated, robotic, and the data would then would come to my office here in California, and I would sift through it all every morning for 8 years.
Those discoveries, the discovery of Eris, then has ultimately led to the demotion of Pluto, which a lot of people were very upset about. Any sort of words of sympathy for people who got upset about that?
I understand. I totally understand how one can be upset about it. It'd be like if somebody suddenly, plucked a house from down the road and said, "Nope, that's not part of your neighborhood anymore. It doesn't exist." It just seems wrong. But it's an opportunity for people who are upset about it to actually understand why it happened. I still, even a decade later, most people, I think, still don't really understand the context of what was going on, which is that Pluto is part of this belt of bodies out beyond Neptune, the Kuiper Belt, of which there are thousands and thousands of them. Pluto is just it's not even the most massive one. It's the second most massive one. It's the brightest one that we happen to see right now. And if you look at the solar system, the real solar system, you see these big planets, and then you see this tiny band of debris on the outside, and it totally makes sense to classify these differently. So anyone who's still upset about Pluto really needs to go look into what the actual solar system looks like, and I think they'll really understand why.
Question. So I know your current research, you've said the idea of searching for planet 9. Yes. That potentially is a new planet to be discovered.
Yeah. So it is definitely a planet. It's about 6 times the mass of the Earth. So it is the 5th largest planet of our solar system. I am firmly convinced it exists. This is how I spend most of my time these days, searching through this. It's not exactly the same process as finding the old ones, but it's not unrelated. We're sorting through old data, looking for things that might be it, and trying to find it. If we do find it, we have predicted about how big it is, about 6 times the mass of the Earth, how far away it is. It's probably something like 500 times further away from the sun than the Earth is, which puts it something like 10 or 15 times further away than Neptune. It's really way far out there. So, we have this compact, I think of this compact, 8-planet system, and then way on the outside of it is this one body sitting around, lurking, waiting to be found.
And I know the object Sedna was part of your discoveries. Do you think Planet 9 is within the orbit of Sedna because it's fairly distant, or is these still some of the unknown?
So Sedna is one of the bodies that actually pointed us to the existence of Planet 9. So the reason we now understand that we think that Planet 9 is there is because Planet 9 is pushing around some of the most distant bodies in the solar system. And one of those that it's pushing around is Sedna. So Sedna definitely, the way it works, Sedna is here. If the sun's here, Sedna is on an orbit like this, very elongated orbit. Planet 9 goes the opposite direction on an elongated orbit too. So they definitely cross orbits at some point in time. They're both tilted with respect to the solar system, and so Planet 9 is tilted one way, Sedna's tilted the other way. So they're kind of in this one plane like that. So it's those clues that help us figure out exactly where it is and where to look for it. In fact, I actually suspect it's sitting sort of against the backdrop of the Milky Way galaxy, which is making it more difficult to find. I suspect.
Maybe more of a science fiction adopted term, but a Planet X. So
yeah, so Planet X is not it's not actually a science fiction term, although it's been adopted by science fiction. Yeah. Planet X was a name given by Percival Lowell to the planet for which he was looking back when it turned out Pluto was discovered by the Lowell Observatory, but it was because they had built that observatory to look for Lowell's Planet X. And Planet X, in Lowell's prediction, was a massive planet that was perturbing the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. So he, just the same way that Neptune was found by Uranus's perturbations, astronomers all around the world then started looking at Uranus and Neptune and trying to think, oh, maybe there's another one out there. And they measured these perturbations of Uranus and Neptune, which turned out to not be true. They were all just bad measurements, but that he used those bad measurements to predict Planet X. So for years, people still were looking for Planet X until about 1990, when finally that was put to rest. So really, when people say Planet X, even though they don't know it, they're actually talking about Percival Lowell's planet. So we've been trying very hard not to call this one Planet X because that was a different planet. So Planet 9 seems like the right term to use here, plus it's just a little bit mean to Pluto, which makes me happy.
Well, I've got another question. Have you got a soft spot or a favorite object that you've discovered? Maybe it's a favorite childhood.
Yeah, this is exactly like what it is. It's like it's your favorite child. It's your favorite child, but you can't actually admit it when they're paying attention.
Yeah.
I have to say there are two different ways. So Sedna, it's hard not to be in love with Sedna just for what it has taught us about the solar system. And so I would say Sedna might be the most important discovery of those outer solar system ones. But really, the one that I think is just fascinating is Haumea. Haumea is the one that it's elongated. It's kind of like a ball that's been stepped on. It's really long. It's in this axis, it's as big as Pluto. In this axis, it's about half the size of Pluto. In this one, it's about 75% the size of Pluto. It spins end over end every 4 hours. The outside of it looks like pure ice. It looks like an ice cube, and yet it has, when we measured the mass of it, it has the mass of a rock. So it's basically a big rock with a thin layer of ice on the outside. It's got these two moons going around it, which are little ice cubes, and then it has a spray of other objects, other little ice cubes in orbit around, not it, but around the sun, that have been ejected from it. So we now know that it's the product of a larger object early in the solar system that got smacked by something large. So originally it would have been rock on the inside, ice on the outside. It got hit. Most of that ice got knocked off. Two of them are moons. Dozens of them are elsewhere. It spun really fast. That spinning elongated it outward. It's a crazy object. And I someday I hope that we get to see it up close. And it's just a bizarre body in the solar system. Trying to figure out that whole story I just gave you about Haumea was about 5 or 6 years worth of work, and it might have been the 5 or 6 most fun years that I've been working. Although the searching for Planet 9 is pretty fun too. So first we found it.
Yeah.
Then the second thing we realized is that it was spinning really fast. We saw that it gets brighter and fainter and brighter and fainter and brighter and fainter. And so that was weird. I'm like, what is going on there? Shortly thereafter, we found a moon around it, and we found out that the surface looked like just water ice, chunks of water, which you could do from just looking at the reflected sunlight off the surface of it. So that was weird. We realized it was heavy and something like the density of a rock. And so we put together the story like, well, maybe the reason it's spinning so fast and elongated is because it got hit in something. So we made up that story early on, and most of the other astronomers who studied this reason in space said, "No, that's ridiculous. That's a stupid story. There's no chance that that's the answer to this question." We're like, well, okay, I don't know, maybe. So we kept on studying it, and we found a second moon, which was interesting. At the time, there weren't any other objects that had two known moons out there, so that was super cool. So 2 moons, weird. Trying to think of what the next thing that we found. I think the part that really drove home that story was when we found that those other objects. We found this collection of bodies around the Kuiper Belt that were all just ice. They looked like pure ice cubes, which is unusual out there. Most of the things are kind of this dirty, rocky stuff that we don't really understand what it is. But a small number were just ice, and we looked at them and like, why are these here? What is going on? And suddenly, this moment again, some of these moments you just have these aha moments. I was sitting with my students at a conference in Sicily, and we had been to the conference dinner. We were drinking nice Italian wine. We were thinking about this, and and the student who was working on this, she said, "Yeah, you know what's weird? They all kind of have the same orbit too, and it's all kind of like the orbit of Haumea." I'm like, oh. So the way that happens is that when that collision happened, these things got just slightly deviated from the orbit of Haumea. Now there's this cloud around the sun. And that was it. At that point, it was like, yes, this is now the answer. We now realize that those 2 moons, if we got detailed observations from the Hubble Space Telescope, those 2 moons are also little ice chunks, and we can tell that they don't affect each other gravitationally very much. They don't weigh very much. So it's this whole long story that takes a really long time to reconstruct. Wow.
I'd imagine that was quite a rewarding
it was fun.
Eureka moment.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know I've kept you longer than 5 minutes, and my apologies about that. I've got one last question for you. So maybe more on a philosophical level. So any life lessons learned for looking for this planetary needle in a cosmic haystack?
It sounds trite, but it's absolutely true. It's patience, and patience is hard. This has been since we first proposed the existence of Planet 9. Now, is it 3.5 years? I think I've lost a year. It might be 4.5 years ago. I think we've all lost years at this point, so I don't know. Who knows exactly when it was, but I think it's 4.5 years ago. So at first I was like, great, we're going to go find it. It's going to happen really quickly, and it didn't happen the first year because we had some technical challenges at the telescopes. And the second year we were going to find it, and there was a lot of bad weather as we were searching. The third year we finally got good data and didn't find it, and it is difficult to not get kind of bored and want to move on. And I have that feeling frequently, like, okay, it's just a planet, somebody else can go find it, and I don't care, I'm going to go to something else. But I know, the day that I open up the newspaper and read that somebody else found it, it's going to be a very depressing day. And so I have to, every time I sit down, I have to like, okay, excited to find this, let's do this exciting work again today. But it's it's a long grind for what will be, I think, a pretty important result.
Well, I find it really fascinating. So thank you so much for
You're very welcome.
Spending the time. Lots of scientists have done amazing discoveries and periods of trial and tribulation in history. So
yeah, let's hope so. We'll see what happens.
Well, I'll let you go and get back to
All right.
research. Thank you so much again. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right, goodbye. Thank you.
All right, bye.